Hello everyone, I'm Siddharthan. In this video, let's understand how we can deploy a Python API using AWS Lambda function. So AWS Lambda is a serverless function that helps us to build these APIs without any server or without any managing the servers. So all the underlying servers and the infrastructures are maintained by AWS itself. So for deploying this, first we will build our Python API using the package called as FastAPI. So once we test that out, we will deploy that using AWS Lambda. So this will be the agenda for today's video, and let's get started. I'll open my PyCharm, and currently I'm running Python 3.10 version. So keep note of the versions that you are running, because once we are going to deploy this, we have to give all these details while creating these AWS function. So how this basically works is, so once we create this API in FastAPI, we will package all the dependencies in a zip file and upload that zip file in this AWS Lambda from console. So once that is done, we can do this deployment and we can access that API endpoint. So first I'll create a requirements.txt file that has the list of libraries that we need. So let's call this as requirements.txt, and here first I'll put FastAPI, which is the package that helps us to create these APIs and endpoints. So the latest version for FastAPI is 0.111.0, and then let's install UVCon. So UVCon is kind of used to run these APIs. So the latest UVCon version is 0.29.0, and the next one that we need is Mangum. So Mangum, the latest version, the time that I'm recording this video is 0.17.0. So this Mangum, we are going to use it as an handler. So it's kind of specifically used for these AWS Lambda thing. It basically handles the Lambda requests so that it's easier to integrate with the web application. So we'll be using this as the handler for our code. So the default handler for AWS Lambda is the Lambda handler, so that we can replace this one. So we will be replacing that later. So this is the first step. So now I need to install all these libraries. So I'll open the terminal, and as you can see, this is currently in my project directory. So here I'll say pip install -r requirements.txt. So this command will basically go through this requirements.txt file and install all the dependencies or the libraries within the specific packages that are mentioned here. So I'll run this, and this is installing the libraries. So the next step is we can create a Python file called as main.py file. So this name shouldn't change, so it should always be this main.py file. So here we can create our FastAPI application with the necessary API endpoints. So let this installation kind of complete. So in the meantime, we can write this code for main.py. So this has completed. I can just clear this out by saying clear. I'll close this terminal. So here I can say from FastAPI import FastAPI with uppercase F and API. Okay, and then from Mangum import uppercase M and Mangum. So now I'll say app is equal to FastAPI. So I mean, in my channel I've already uploaded videos on this, how to build this APIs with API with this FastAPI, and how to deploy your ML models as this API. So you can refer to this videos if you want. So we are creating this app, so later we will use this in order to run this API. So we are using this FastAPI that we have imported, and I'm going to say handler is equal to Mangum, and within parentheses we have to pass this app. So this will kind of handle those things, and this will be the handler that we'll be using for our API, and I'll create two basic endpoints. So I'll say app.get, and within this quotes I'll just kind of put a /. So this is like the endpoint that will run by default in the URL, so it doesn't have any specific endpoints. So now I'll say function, let's maybe call this as endpoint1. Sorry, so define endpoint1, and let's not pass any parameters here, and let's say output is going to be, let's call this as same output is the key, and this dictionary as this hello world. So the result that you're going to get is you will receive a JSON which has this output, and the message will be hello world. And we can also kind of return this using this return output. So when you call this particular endpoint, right, so this will return this JSON, which is output of allowable. And we can again create another endpoint as app.get. So here I can maybe put a name for this endpoint. So let's call this as allow, and then create a function for this endpoint, and maybe let's call this as endpoint2. And again, let's not pass any parameters for now. Let's keep things simple. And again, I'll say output is equal to output, and maybe let's say this says API output. Let's maybe print that. Okay, so this will be the result, and then we can just return this by saying output. Right, so this is our simple FastAPI endpoint. So the first endpoint will just return this output, and the second endpoint will return this. So we have to call this particular endpoint. So we have to test this out. So we can test this locally to make sure that everything works as expected. So open your terminal and say ubicon space main colon app. So ubicon is going to run this API, and this main is nothing but the name of the Python file, and app is the name that you are declaring here. Okay, so the FastAPI application. So app. So run this, and this will give you the URL, local URL in which your API is running. So you can click this, and first it says output allowable with an exclamatory mark, which is this endpoint, the default endpoint that we are having. So the next one is you can add this allow to that. So this is the URL, and I can say /allow, and this is API output, which is the second endpoint. So you can also open this Swagger page by putting that URL and /docs. So this will open the Swagger docs thing, and here you can see this GUI thing. So where you have this endpoint1 and endpoint2. So here I'll kind of expand this out, and you can try it out here as well. So instead of typing all these things in the URL, you can execute here, and you will see the requesting URL. So the URL that you need to use in order to call this, and the corresponding output and the other things. So you can also try the second output. So if you kind of don't know how to call a particular URL, you can also use this Swagger, and once you try this out, right, so it will give you the URL that you need to use. So it's working as expected. The next step is we are going to package this main.py file with all the dependencies, and then we are going to upload it to AWS Lambda, and then we can deploy that there. So that's like a pretty simple process. So now I'll press Ctrl C. So this will abort this step where basically my ubicon is running. So here I'm going to say pip install -t dependencies -r requirements.txt. Let's understand this command. Maybe I'll run this first. So we are doing this pip install and saying -t. So this -t represents the target directory. So in this project directory of video record thing, so I'm going to create a folder called as dependencies and install all the libraries that are mentioned in this requirements.txt file. So not only this libraries, but all the other libraries these packages need. So let's say that FastAPI requires another library, so that's also going to be installed. So that's what it says. So install the libraries present in this requirements.txt file in the folder called as dependencies. So that's what is happening, and this has successfully installed all the libraries in this dependencies package. You can see it. So now this has all the packages, right? So to this we have to move this main.py file. Maybe I'll open this here. So this is this dependencies thing. So here I'm going to copy my main.py file and paste it in this dependency folder, and I'm going to select all these files, right click here, and I'm going to compress this. I'll maybe name this as lambda artifacts. Okay, so this is a zip file, right? So this is kind of this zip file. So I'm going to cut it out and paste it over here, and let me open this. Okay, so this lambda artifacts basically contains all the folders and the files that are present in this dependencies folder. Don't compress these dependencies, because within the zip file it will create a folder called as dependencies, and within that you would have all the other folders. But instead select all these files. Don't forget that you have to paste this main.py file. So this is also important. So once that's done, we can upload our lambda artifacts.zip. I think there is a typo there. let me correct this. Okay, so Lambda artifacts. So now I'll open my AWS console. So again, the prerequisite for this is you should have a AWS account and you should have this management console access. And again, so AWS Lambda in the free tier access, like free access to this Lambda services, the 1 million request is free for 1 month. So you can maybe check that once. I'm like not very sure about that, but again, if you're using a company account, so you'll probably have an IAM access associated to you, so make sure that you have access to kind of create this Lambda and work with that. So once you're in your console, go to the search bar and you can just search Lambda, and within this Lambda, so this is the main page that it will take you. So here give this create a function. So we have different options. So you can also use a container image, dockerize this and use this from the Elastic Container Registry. So but we are not going to use that. We are going to author from scratch. And here I'll maybe call this as let's say FastAPI deploy on Lambda. Okay, so in this runtime you have to choose your runtime. So you have this Python 3.12 and or Node.js, Java and so on. So the version that I'm working on is Python 3.10, so I'm choosing that. So make sure that you are kind of using the same version that you're working on, because all the packages is kind of similar to, or it's basically it runs on this version. So you cannot be on different version here and use a different version there, so it's going to throw some errors. So we have this runtime as 3.10 and you can choose the architecture. So this is the architecture that I'm in, and permissions you can just leave it as such, and change default execution role. So probably the admin would have given you an access, so a role for you. So if not, you can request them and ask them to create a role for you. So if you already have a role, you can kind of choose that. I'm going to create a new one here. Okay, so if you again you're using a company account, it's most probably you won't be having access to create a new role, so you can request a role for them and use that one. And in the advanced settings you can leave most things simple, most things unchecked, but enable function URL. So this will give you an HTTPS endpoint for your API, and authentication type, so AWS IAM, but for now I'm going to choose none. So this means like whenever a person is accessing your this Lambda or this API, right, so it is going to require access for this IAM, but let's not do that for now. So I don't want to give authentication every time, so I'll just put this as none. And if you want, you can also kind of choose the CORS policy as well, cross origin resource sharing, to let only these two domains can use your APIs and so on. So for now I'm not touching it. Okay, so just create a function here. So things will like happen pretty quickly. It's not going to take a lot of time to create this function and deploy this. So the prerequisite is that you should have this access to work with this Lambda thing, and then this has created, right? So this is the URL that you're going to call. So when I click this is going to take me to allow from Lambda. So this is like the base version. So to this we have to upload our zip file. So scroll below, you have this option called as upload from, right? So click that, give zip file. So there are two options. You can either upload from the zip file or put your zip file in the Amazon S3 and then load it from there. So they recommend that if the file is pretty large, you can put it in S3 instead of loading it here. So I'm going to choose zip file, and I'll give this upload option. So it's in my video record May3, and this is the one that we have created, right? So lambda artifacts.zip and save. So this will update the code that's present in the default template that we previously saw. So wait for this to complete. And there is one more thing that we have to change regarding this mangum handler, so that we can do once this step is done. Okay, so the file is uploaded and the code is updated now. So when you click this, you are going to get a error saying that internal server error. This is because of the handler. So come back to your AWS function, and here go to this runtime settings. So you're seeing this handler, right? So this is the default handler, which is lambda function.lambda handler. So give this edit. So here I'm going to say main dot handler. So this is nothing but within this dependencies we have this main file, right, main.py file, and within that our handler variable name is handler. So this is what I'm basically representing here. Main is the Python file name, and the handler is variable is the name of the handler that we are using. So once this change is done, click save. So the code will be updated and the handler will also be updated. Now give this link. So once you click this link, it says output hello world, which is the first endpoint that we have created. So if you want, you can kind of after this URL put a forward slash and hello, or you can create like any endpoints that you want. So we have this output as API output. So this is how you can deploy your FastAPI API endpoint on AWS Lambda. So if you want, you can also open your docs. Again, this will open this Swagger page, and from there also you can test this out. So now this is not running in my local, but this is in AWS, and this you can use this URL in order to access it from Python or other front-end application, so that like it's like you're working on building this back-end APIs, and the front-end person can use this out. So you can give this, try it out, execute, and this will say output as hello world, and then we have the second endpoint. When I try this out, it's going to say API output, and this is the URL that we need to call. Okay, so this is how you can build a simple API endpoint in FastAPI in Python, and you can deploy this in AWS Lambda. So similarly, we can follow this approach in order to deploy our machine learning models as well in this AWS Lambda, as we know that Lambda is like pretty much free for 1 million requests, so it's kind of useful for testing this code and for development. So I hope that everyone is clear until this point, and I'll see you in the next upload. Thanks for watching.